And we're live.
It's happening.
What's happening? Resolume live training. Thanks for joining us. Sorry about the delay, everybody.
No technical difficulties were happening. We were just praying.
Yeah, we were blessing this time. Thank you for joining us, probably on your lunch break or wherever you're joining us from. If you're watching after the fact, thank you so much for being here. So let's dive in. No time to waste. Let's do it. So we wanted to put this together to give everyone some clarity and a chance to ask questions. If you're on the chat, feel free to chime in, say hey, let us know you're there, let us know if you can't hear or if there's any technical issues on the stream, but hopefully you're all here ready to go. And feel free to chime in with questions. I have a few opportunities to ask questions as well throughout the stream, so we're happy to have you. So let's dive in. Here, first I wanted to highlight a couple resources that you guys have if you want to learn Resolume on your own. Resolume.com/training actually has a ton of sort of beginner level, and they dive into some topics pretty in depth. Some training resources that are on there. I went through and kind of highlighted a few that are actually really helpful to watch. There's a ton on there. There's about 2 hours worth of content on there. But these clips here are actually the ones that are kind of helpful in our context. A few of them might be a little bit different, but they explain a little bit of the basics of how Resolume works and how VJs, normal VJs will use it. VJ stands for video jockey. Resolume is designed to be sort of a VJ software. So these videos kind of highlight some of the things that we use in our context. Some of the other ones go a little bit more in depth, but if you want to take a screenshot of this or write these down, if you write really fast, hopefully you do, but these will be some good resources for you to go through and watch. And as we dive in, if you go through something, if we go through something and it maybe it goes over your head or maybe you didn't totally understand, go back and watch some of these videos that might fill in some of the gaps for you. So wanted to put this resource out here and give you an opportunity to learn on your own as well. So there's two things that I want to cover today, and one of them is about how to output out of Resolume and some of the way the composition structure is set and how outputs work with slices and things like that. We'll get into that in a minute. And the second one is timecode, how timecode works, because I know that's a little bit confusing to some people. It can be a little bit, it can be a little tricky to wrap your head around. So I wanted to make sure everyone understands how we use that and describe what timecode is, how it works, how we use it, and all that, and give you a chance to ask questions about it. So let's talk about output. We're on the same level
Let's
right
talk
now.
about it.
We are doing so good.
Really disappointed I didn't build a pip look for this, but maybe it's not. Maybe that can happen along the way.
We'll let Jared work on that. We'll do a little live pip action. Before we get into output, though, I want to talk about composition structure, because that's going to be super important in the way that we use output. So I'm actually going to go over to Resolume here. We're going to look at, and along the way, we'll pull up the screens here at Valentine. We'll show you kind of what's going on. But I've got a normal looking composition. If you've served on the weekend or if you've run Resolume at all, this won't look unfamiliar to you. But I'm going to go to my output menu. Actually, I'm going to walk through the way the composition is structured, because that's actually really important in the way that we output to different screens, different devices. So let's walk through that. And I'm sure I've actually put out a couple videos last week about how to build a composition and went over how to use the template file that we provide. Over here under compositions, I'm actually going to load my template file, and we'll talk about how the layers are structured. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top. Now it looks like I've got some content in my template file here. But if you notice on the left here, there's actually these, there's individual layers, and they're all named and they're all color-coded. But then if you notice this line running along the left side of the screen that goes up to this tab here, this is actually indicates a layer group. And layer groups are really important, because when we want to actually output to different screens or output different things to maybe your pixel bars or to your main screen, you can actually output individual things from different layers or from layer groups. And so a layer group allows us to have sort of a set of layers that maybe go to one screen, while another set of layers goes to another screen. So if you notice, what we have going on over here is this group has 4 layers in it. Reso 1, layer 1, and this is for visuals, so anything that goes in the background. Layers 2 and 3 are for lyrics. Depending on how we want our lyrics to look, maybe they're just going to go straight over our content, or maybe they're going to have a fancy blend mode.
Or maybe we'll picture in picture in the bottom left corner.
Yeah, nice. Picture in picture.
It's happening.
Now you have to look at us. I feel bad for. I'm so sorry. Um, so Reso layer 3 here is for layer. Reso's layer 2 and 3 in this group are for lyrics. Depending on how we want them to look, they might go on the first layer, they might go on the second layer, and then Reso layer 4 is for flow content. That way it goes on top of anything going on, so if there's any issues with our lyrics or with timecode, which we'll get into later, we can override it with flow. And we don't have to worry about having our flow and pulling other things down. We can just push flow content up and it'll go on the very top layer. So this group is actually going to go to our main screen, and I'll show you how in a little bit. The second layer group, if you scroll down a little bit further, is for, um, we use it for pixel bars. Of course, layer groups you can use for whatever, but the way we've used it is for pixel bars or epic strips or septrons or whatever pixel mappable fixture you want to use. That's what we have here. And the first layer is for visuals, just like in our main, in our first layer group. The first layer is for visuals. The second layer is just for flow, because we don't need lyrics on any pixel mappable fixtures. There'd be no point in having lyrics on a little LED strip. You wouldn't be able to read them, so we don't have to worry about those. So you notice the structure is very similar. It just doesn't have layers for lyrics. And then the last group I'm going to cover, we have a couple other groups here that we use in Ballantine for different things, but those are pretty much irrelevant to you on the weekends, these groups down here. But you'll notice we have kind of the same concept where we'll use these to output to different devices. But the third group I'm going to go over is a little bit different in the way we use it. This is the flow group, and I've got 4 layers that are just labeled flow. So that means we can actually have 4 different looks or 4 different clips that we can use for flow, and those are all mapped to your MIDI controller, faders 1 through 4, and we can put any content on any of these 4 layers here that we want, and we can push those up. And what happens is these actually, this layer group gets kind of submixed or put into one of these what are called video routers. So this little tile here, when this tile is live or when this clip is live, anything that's coming out of this layer group from faders or layers 1 through 4 is going to show up on this layer. So that's going to actually show up on our pixel bars. And then up here, this is actually going to show up on our main screen. So that's how layer groups work. Layer groups allow us to just take different sets of layers and put them different places, either again within our composition or on our output. So now that you know how the composition is structured, let's talk about output. Let's go back to our advanced output. So there's 2 ways you can output in Resolume. One of them is actually covered in one of the videos that I just showed in actually outputting. Resolume talks through how you can output to one device or one display. But we use the advanced output module because we usually export, or we usually output to both a projector or some sort of LED screen and to pixel bars or pixel strips or something like that. So when you start using the advanced output module, 2 things that you need to be aware of, 2 concepts you need to be aware of. 2, just 2. Well, actually more than that, but 2 main ones are screens and slices.
Like pizza?
Slices of pizza,
Cool.
basically. So a screen is like your whole pizza, and then a slice is like a piece of pizza, or I guess a
A
slice of
slice.
pizza.
Understood.
Yeah.
Go on.
So screens allow you to output to a physical or digital output device on your computer. So if you have an HDMI cable plugged into your computer, you're going to use a screen to output to that. A slice is going to allow you to select portions of your composition and place them on your screens. So say we want maybe not our entire composition, not all the layers from our composition to output to a screen. Maybe we want just that one group that I talked about, maybe that those first 4 layers in that one layer group to go to our screens. We can use a slice to say, hey, Resolume, only take what's coming out of these 4 layers and send them to this screen. And then for pixel bars, hey, only take what's coming out of these 2 layers and put them on pixel bars. So screens and slices. And in true Keynote fashion, I'm going to give you a little demo of that real quick. So let's switch back over to Resolume. And I'm going to load my session from today, or my composition from today.
How did you do that, Andy? It just magically appeared. What did you do to make that happen?
I did. I double-clicked on the composition here in the sidebar. If you go to your browser, and the way I have our interface laid out, I've got our browser over in the corner here, and I've got files, sources, effects, slices, and compositions. And I went over this in the videos I posted last week as well. Resolume 201 and 202, or 201 syncing files and building a composition, I think is what I named them. So you can go to your composition browser and load a composition from here in the browser instead of having to go to the Finder and find your composition. Much easier to find it right here.
The more you know.
The more you know. And now I'm going to go and actually, to get to your advanced output module, you go to your output menu, and this is where you can also full screen output to only one display. So like I said, if you only have one display, no pixel bars, nothing else, you can full screen output to another display. Usually it would be display 2 or something like that if you have a second display plugged into your computer. But I'm actually going to go to advanced, and you'll notice it's checked right now. That means it's outputting. But if I click on this, it opens the advanced output window. And there's a lot going on. This is Ballantyne's file, so there's a lot of screens and things going on here. But I'm going to show you just a couple things. Actually, I'm going to make a new configuration. And this is where presets are really helpful. And I don't have time to get too much into presets, but you find presets a lot around Resolume. If you have different effects or different plugins or different items that you change and adjust a lot, you can use presets to save different configurations to quickly switch from one to another. So advanced output is a good example of that, where I have different configurations, maybe from the weekend to a special event to another weekend. So I can make a new preset and actually just start completely blank. So you notice if I start fresh, I've got one screen, and every screen is going to have at least one slice, because every pizza has to have at least one piece. Otherwise, it's not a pizza anymore.
It's a new start for every new screen.
Yes. So our screen here, if you notice when I select my screen, on the right, my menu changes a little bit. So I've got, at the very top, I've got something called device. And like I said before, get back to Keynote, screens allow you to output to a physical or digital output device on your computer. So when I go to my device list, you'll see what I have are either physical devices, so display 1, 2, and I've actually got 4 external displays plugged into this. In most cases, you would only have 2, maybe display 1, which is your main screen, and display 2 would be your projector. I've also got a capture card, which is an SDI card that's in this computer, so those show up as well. And then I've got a couple digital output settings like NewTek NDI or Siphon. You can read up on those on your own. But I've also got virtual output. Virtual output means that this isn't going anywhere right now. So you might have this screen set up, but if it's on virtual output, it's not actually going to output anywhere. It's just going to pretend like it is, so you can still operate and build your Resolume composition, but Resolume's not actually going to send it anywhere. It's just a virtual output. So I'm going to go ahead and assign this to display 2, or actually I'm going to do display 4 to get it on my big screen up here, but in your case you would probably do display 2. So I'm going to assign it to display 4 right now. And then the other thing I'm going to look at is my slice. Now when I select this slice, notice it kind of takes up the whole screen. It gives me like a little bounding box that shows my whole screen. And instead of output device, I get something called input source. So if I drop down my input source, what I get, and this will probably look familiar, calling back to what I just walked through with composition structure, if I drill this down, you get a couple selections. So you get your entire composition, which is every layer from top to bottom of your composition stacked on top of each other. Or you can see right here we have groups. And this is where I can select those individual layer groups as an input source for my slice. So I've got out underscore reso 1, which if you notice, that's my first group here with my 4 layers. Out underscore reso 2, which is my second group here for pixel bars. So since I'm going to want this on my main screen, I'm going to select out underscore reso 1. And now if I fire something on that group, you'll notice it comes up in this slice.
Right there.
There you go, right above us. If I select another input source though, say I select the flow group that maybe doesn't have anything going on in it right now, well now you see my slice is blank, but my composition still has content running. But I'm pulling only from what's happening in my flow group, which right now there's nothing going on because neither of these faders are up, There's nothing coming out of this flow group. If I choose out Reso 3 or any of these other groups, this slice will change to select just what's happening in those. So you'll notice out Reso 2, this layer group, doesn't have any lyrics, but my composition, I'm seeing lyrics because those are on the top layer. So you can see here your input source is just going to be whatever portion, either layer group or part of the composition you want to select. You can choose your input source here and work with it. So I'm going to go back to out Reso 1. And now you see I've got my lyrics back. I've got everything coming out of this layer group. Now, something else you can do, and this is where we get into a little bit of a deep dive, but not only can you choose what layer groups or layers you want to control, but you can also select what portion of the screen you want.
Why would we ever want to do that?
Well, I don't know, say maybe we're mapping some LED screens or maybe our pixel bars.
There you go.
We can't just take an entire 16 by 9 composition and cram it down onto one pixel bar, right? We want maybe more than one slice to be able to control where our content is going. So I'm actually going to create a second screen for that because I need to actually output that to a different display. So I'm going to create a new screen. If I create a new slice, it'll just create a new slice in this screen. I can get rid of it here. I'm just going to create a new screen. I'm going to assign that to, I'm actually going to do work with our banners up on the stage here, but this concepts are very similar for pixel bars. So I'm going to go to display 3. And let's say I've got these banners up here and I want to actually, and you can see I'm outputting right now. And of course we can't see lyrics because they're not mapped on these screens, but
they could be.
they could be.
We did that.
We did
for
do that.
Easter.
Yep. But I've actually, and you can see I'm under my slice. If I choose a different layer group, my content will go away. Or I can choose out Reso 3 and I can select what part of the composition I want to work with. All these are just different layer groups that I'm using for my input source. See, I've got a layer group here for Valentine that just pulls the lyrics and puts them on the lower third. But I'm just going to go back to Reso 2, and I'm actually just going to take one slice. I'm just going to grab part of it. Just going a little bit. I'm going to get some static content so it's a little easier to tell what we're doing. And let's say I want to map this across my screens upstage. So I'm going to select one slice. And if you notice, I've got two things. I've got two tabs. I'm going pretty in-depth here. But I've got input selection and output transformation. So input selection is what part of the window I want to, what part of the composition or layer group or whatever I have selected, what actual part of it I want to use. So I don't have to grab the whole thing. I can just take part of it, scroll up and down over here and grab different pieces of it. So if I go back to output transformation, you can see now I have this piece of that content. Maybe if I bring it down to the bottom, I can go into output transformation and you see. So the difference between input selection and output transformation, input selection is actually what I'm selecting from the composition or layer group or the content that's actually playing back. Output transformation is how it's actually getting outputted on the screen. So if you notice here under output transformation, it looks all stretched and scaled, but I can then grab it, scale it down, and move it onto part of the screen. So you can see as I'm moving it around, it's adjusting and I can map it to different parts of my LED screen here. But if I leave my output transformation here and I change my input selection, I can now grab a different part of the content and put it within that window. So it's kind of like selecting a sample and then creating a window for it and moving that window around onto your canvas. So that's pretty in-depth.
Would you say that Bob Ross was an inspiration of sorts?
Yes. And I would say all these things are just happy little accidents.
That's okay. Couldn't say it better myself.
And that's why a lot of our content is trees and nature, because it's just God's creations.
It's true.
And they're just beautiful.
Very true.
So
I digress.
As do I. Um, so the last thing I'll show you in output transformation, because a lot of you guys are working with fixtures that um, are actually DMX based or lighting based. So the same concept applies, but instead of screens and slices, you're actually going to work with these two items down here, DMX Lumiverses and DMX fixtures. They behave the same as screens and slices. The DMX Lumiverse would be an example of a screen because it's tied to a physical device that you're outputting to, whether it's a control box for your pixel bars or a fixture that has a DMX address. And your DMX fixture is going to be this slice, so that's going to allow you to choose what part of the content you want to actually send to that fixture. So just to do a real quick example of that, under DMX Lumiverse, I'm going to add a new DMX Lumiverse. And you'll notice my output transformation window looks a little different because I'm just outputting information, not necessarily a video signal. But my input selection looks the same. So I've got this fixture now, and I can choose it, and I can grab a different portion of this content, and look what it does, and it shows you a little preview of what it's actually outputting onto DMX. But I can actually grab a different piece of this content, however I want, and output it to this fixture. So a lot of times what it'll look like, I'll show you what our current setup looks like with our pixel bars. So if I go back to our preset that I used earlier, and again, just to plug presets, if a great thing to do is just save a preset of your setup, so that way if anything happens, you can reload that preset. Sometimes you have to toggle away from the preset or make a new one and then toggle back to your existing preset for it to load correctly. But if you'll notice, under my second screen here, I've got all these Ceptrons. I've got them mapped out just like they exist in real time. And I can select different parts of it. So if I select all of my Ceptrons,
Which is what we use instead of pixel bars.
yep, Ceptron is the Ballantine equivalent of pixel bars, but it's a 1 meter long, 100 pixel by 1 pixel wide LED strip. Basically, same thing that you guys would have, same form factor. But notice my input source is set to out underscore reso2 because that's my group that I want for pixel bars. So I can have separate content on my pixel bars if it's just in that group as I do on my main screen. So those are all mapped in real time. Those are mapped exactly how I want. And then these are still video based, but what you would do for pixel bars is create a DMX Lumiverse and then create DMX fixtures within that. So I think at some point we'll do another session just on pixel mapping, and there's a little bit of an art to that to map everything correctly. It takes some time to do that, but that should get you started. And moving on from that, I want to do a little bit of troubleshooting.
Everyone's favorite weekend activity.
Troubleshooting is so much fun because there's a couple of common things that I see people get mixed up on. So here's three main things when troubleshooting output that you can look out for. Number one, confirm your displays are recognized by the computer. This is really important. If you don't have your displays either listed when you select one of your screens, if you don't actually have your displays listed here, or in your system preferences, if you don't have your displays listed under your computer, or maybe if the mirror displays box is checked, that's not going to work very well because then you won't be able to output separately from Resolume. So make sure all your devices are recognized by the computer. Second thing, watch out for virtual outputs. So remember earlier I said how if you have virtual output selected under your device, it's not actually going to go anywhere. So say I go back to my main screen and I select virtual output. Well, that screen is still there, but notice it's on virtual output. So I'm not actually going to get anything on my screen now, even though it looks like, according to everything I see, it looks like everything is working. It's not actually going to output because it's on virtual output. So it's a good little scan to just go over here on the left and make sure nothing says virtual output. I'll switch that back to display 4.
My weekend, thanks you.
Yes, you're welcome.
We do have a question from one of our viewers.
Awesome.
From Ryan Pastor.
Hi, Ryan.
When you make the box that represents the pixel bar bigger, do the individual pixels average the pixels that are below it, or does it pick just one pixel?
Oh, very scientific. Yes, it does. It averages the pixels that are below it. So say I kind of hover over this um, yellow texture over here. And you'll notice what's happening here is it's actually taking a sample of that. If I make this smaller, it's going to get very specific, but it is not going to pick just one pixel. It's going to average what's actually happening underneath it. So you can see if I hover over this, over some of this grain, I'll zoom in here so you can see. Oh, sorry about that. Let's zoom in real close here. There we go. So you can see as I hover over some of this grain, uh, it's actually, it looks like it's taking an individual sample from what's underneath it. But if I were to scale this whole thing up, whoops,
That looks like a Bon Iver song title.
that is L colon dash dash. You hear the new Bon Iver album, ampersand colon dash 25. But if I grab this whole thing and I scale all the way up, you can see as I hover over this. Oh, you know what? It looks like I just answered my question. Ryan, it looks like it's taking a sample. It's actually taking an individual pixel based on what it's closest to and highlighting it. Because you can see this square, it's equally over black and pink. If it were taking an average, it would probably be something like half pink. But if I move it just a little bit, it goes to pink.
Wow.
So there you go, Ryan. Looks like we found our answer.
Great question.
Great question. So last thing to look out for when troubleshooting is make sure your slices have the correct input source. So this is the last thing that kind of trips people up. But notice right here, I've got one of my fixtures. I've got this LED fixture that I just kind of popped in here. It would look like a pixel bar, but my input source is actually my composition. And notice when I select it, how it shows me this kind of like pink box and the image, because at Valentine we have sort of a cropped center screen. So I've got both that I can see here, and that's actually what's happening in my composition. That's all my layers stacked together, and that doesn't look right because I need individual control of my pixel bars, so I created a layer group for those. So what I need to do is make sure my input source is actually set to the group that I made for pixel bars. And now you can see it's just that pink image, and if I go over here to my composition and scroll down to my group for pixel bars, I can see that's all I have here is a little magenta item and then a blank tile. So that's the third thing to watch out for when you're troubleshooting output. Once more, make sure your displays are recognized by the computer, watch out for virtual outputs, and make sure your slices have the correct input source. So any more questions on that output?
So far, none on the interwebs.
Awesome. Ryan has the best question so far. I'll give it just a second for them to catch up. And I guess while we're waiting for them to catch up, how's your day, Jared?
My day is great. I just, for all of you, just spent about an hour building out all of the new At Midnight visuals for this weekend. All new songs will have all new visuals, which is very
Nice.
exciting. And then the album releases at midnight. This is turning into a little promo spot. I didn't mean for that to happen.
We should upload all the content at midnight as well.
That's actually a great idea.
We should brand. We should just stick with the brand.
I have not copied anything to the server yet, so that's very possible.
Excellent.
But yeah, I'm going on vacation this weekend.
Nice.
Very excited. Going to go to Washington, D.C. to see my family.
Congratulations.
Pumped.
All right, Internet, everybody good? Any more questions on that?
No questions so far.
All right. Let's move on then. Everybody's favorite topic. Timecode. What is timecode? Well, actually, why is timecode? First question. Timecode, or SMPTE, or LTC, you might hear it referred to as a few different things, allows us to synchronize audio, video, and lighting by using a specialized audio track that computers can interpret as a running clock. What is timecode, though?
Who knows?
Put simply, SMPTE, or timecode, is just an audio signal that sounds like 400 pigs screaming. That's a quote from actually this Resolume support document, resolume.com/support/en for English /SMPTE or SMPTE. That's a really helpful document to read about what timecode is and how it's interpreted. But here's how we can use timecode. So timecode, like I said, is just an audio file, And that can actually be as long as we want it. It can be anywhere from 2 seconds to 24 hours. And usually we stick within that window. But that's
Usually.
usually. But that's not actually super helpful to just have one file that's 24 hours long. What we do is we actually split it up into little 10-minute blocks. So we have right here we have, and let me use my drawing. I haven't even done this yet, but what we've got is some individual audio files here, and we've actually gone in and generated these from a website that actually generates timecode. You can tell it what frame rate you want, and that's what's going on here, and that's kind of the format that you'll see through some of our file names. You'll see timecode is at 30 frames a second, and you'll see it's in the hour, minute, second, and frames format. So if you see a file, or if you see a timer, the timer in Resolume, that's actually reading hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. So what we do is we generate individual files, individual audio files, individual WAV files that are different chunks of time code starting at different hours and different minutes that are 10 minutes long. So we might have one file that starts our clock at 00 and it's 10 minutes long, and then we'll have another file that starts at 10 minutes, another one that starts at 20 minutes, all the way up, and we've gotten quite a bit of these generated. But then you'll see it start to look like 1 hour, 1 hour and 10 minutes, 1 hour 20 minutes, etc. So that's what timecode is, and that's how we use different audio files. Now, why do we do this? This is where we need to talk about offset. On a normal weekend, we might have 3 or 4 or 5 songs that all use timecode, like start with the 2-minute countdown. So our 2-minute countdown starts at 00000000. From the very beginning of our clock, from the beginning of time. I believe the Lord started, I think before he created anything, he started with a 2-minute countdown.
Or a 5 before, depending on your generation.
That's true. So we start our 2-minute countdown right at 0. But what happens when we have a few other songs, right? Let's say somebody clicks on Resurrecting during the 2-minute countdown. Well, if we're using normal time code, what's going to happen is Resurrecting is going to play even though the timer coming from Ableton is saying, hey, 00000000, start at the beginning of this file, right? So this is where offset helps us. Now, let's say we want our files like Resurrecting to actually have its own little block of time code. Let's say when the clock says 0 hours and 10 minutes, we want Resurrecting to start. 0 hours and 20 minutes, we want God of the Promise. 0 hours and 30 minutes, we want Do It Again to start. Well, what we'd have to do in order to make that work is actually make files that are that long and that have 10, 20, or 30 minutes of black up at the top.
Talk about the sync time on that.
That would be awful. And then this video file is 30 minutes long. How much? That would be a huge file. So what we can do, Resolume actually gives us this feature called offset. And what offset does is it allows us to then virtually create that space in between our files. So instead of having to create a 20-minute video file or a 10-minute video file with a bunch of black at the beginning for Resurrecting, I can create an offset in Resolume that says, hey, once the timer in Resolume hits 10 minutes, start Resurrecting. Once the timer hits 20 minutes, start God of the Promise. Once the timer hits 30 minutes, start Do It Again. So one way you can kind of know what's going on is timecode minus offset equals playback position.
Man, I didn't even mean to make the picture-in-picture that size, but that worked out.
That's perfect.
Grace abounds.
Look at that. So timecode minus offset equals playback position. Let's do a quick calculation. Oh, got some transitions. So, real practically, if your timer in Resolume says 9 hours, 11 minutes, 30 seconds, and 21 frames, and your offset and your content is set to 9 hours and 10 minutes, 0 seconds, 0 frames, that means your playback position is going to be at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 21 frames. Yeah?
Does that make sense?
Questions?
If you have questions,
on that?
go ahead and comment. Ryan does have a question about timecode versus Synthi and what is industry standard. His question is, are there other standards of timecode besides SMPTE, or is this industry standard?
Ah, that is a good question. So this is an industry standard timecode format in that it's an audio file. There's another format called MIDI timecode, or MTC. So LTC stands for linear timecode. MTC stands for MIDI timecode. LTC can actually be sent down a system for audio. Um, MTC, or MIDI timecode, can transmit between different MIDI devices and is actually a digital signal, not an analog signal. So that's to the extent of my knowledge, that is how that's what the difference is between the two.
For the sake of elevation, SMPTE is the
Yep.
standard.
Yeah. We haven't had a situation where we've used MIDI time code in a while. We used to, but we actually have a device that'll convert linear time code, or LTC, to MIDI time code, MTC, for different things that'll use that. Um, so in most cases, we'll use LTC. That's why I say LTC, because that's the format of time code we use. MIDI time code, I believe, is also a SMPTE standard or something like that, but it's a digital signal. So, uh, how do you know all these different offsets, though? Do we just decide those on the weekend? What hour, what offsets we're going to use for each song, or?
We don't, Andy. Mr. Google created a great resource that is free for us to use, and we utilize the heck out of it.
It's true. And you can actually go to prod.ec/worshipvisuals, and you can see what timecode offset we use for each song.
I'm going to drop this into the comments so you can copy it if you need it.
Awesome. And with that, let me give you a little demo. So keep that in mind. When I show it to you, it should make a lot more sense. So I'm going to bounce over here back to Resolume. I'm going to close my advanced output. I'm going to reload my advanced output here. Or I'm going to hit cancel. One more thing about advanced output before I move on. If you hit cancel or you just close the window, nothing you do will be saved. Make sure you hit save and close when you use your advanced output module.
That has bit me in the butt many times before, and unfortunately, in Resolume 6, there is not an undo button.
Nope. So
But
hit save and close. But in this case, I'm just going to hit cancel because I don't want to do that. So notice I've got a little bit of time code running actually right now in my interface here. And it just stopped. Perfect timing. So
perfect time code.
time coding. I'm going to actually go over to Ableton real quick and show you how this works practically. And you can see actually what I'm running. I've got a normal weekend session loaded up here. And I've got a track up here. And that's why I said LTC, because sometimes you'll see LTC, sometimes it'll be labeled time code. Just depends. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go over to my browser. Oh, and I'm going to show you what a timecode file looks like in our context. So let's see, we've got this file. We've got this track, and this got one timecode file on it. It's labeled LTC 1510. Zoom in a little bit here. LTC 1510.00. So that's LTC, or timecode, hour 15, minute 10, second 0, 0 frames. And this song is King of My Heart, I can see from the label in Ableton.
Thanks, JMX and Vince.
But I'm going to drill this down so you can actually see the waveform. Like I said, this is just an audio file, just like click is an audio track, just like loops are an audio track. This is actually an audio track, and if I zoom way in, all the way at the beginning, you can see what's happening here. Is this is actually a waveform that a computer can read as zeros and ones and can create a clock out of it. That's all timecode is. So all it is just getting an audio signal over to your computer, and then that software, the computer, is reading that like a click track for computers, I call it. It's just reading that as a clock.
Or pigs squealing, as they say.
Yeah, if you ever hear that in the house and
or
you hear
aliens.
something that sounds like pig squealing, or it's probably timecode. So I'm going to play this back and actually see what's happening. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There we go. So you can see if I start this file from the very beginning, Resolume should read somewhere around 15 hours and 10 minutes. I'm going to go back to Resolume. And now I see 15 hours, 10 minutes, and 7 seconds, 8 seconds, 9 seconds. You see what's happening there? So now I'm going to actually fire King of My Heart, because that's the song that we have going on here. And you can see this content's playing back normally. Now, how is that, though? This content, this video file, is not 15 hours long and 10 minutes long, but we've actually got an offset applied to it. So if I click on this video clip, and you can see this SMPTE icon here, this timecode icon right next to the SMPTE label here, the little film clapper board. If I click on this file, you can see what I've got here is offset. I'm just going to just adjust this here a little bit, but I've got my offset is 1510.0.0.0. So if we do that math earlier, like I said, what was the formula, Jared?
Pig squealing minus.
Yep, got it. Timecode minus offset equals playback position.
That was a test. You passed.
Yeah, thank you. So my time code, my currently running time code is 15 hours, 11 minutes, 10 seconds, 11 seconds. That minus my offset, 15 hours and 10 minutes. So what does that leave me with? It leaves me with 1 minute and 19 seconds, 20 seconds, 21 seconds. And you can see that's exactly what playback position is right here.
Oh, let me take the picture and picture off.
Oh, sorry. There we
Alright.
go. So that's exactly what my playback position is right here. So you see if you just basically subtract that, and usually what it comes down to, just drop the first three numbers. The first three numbers, the hour and the 10 or 20 or 30 minutes, usually becomes like the song ID, and then the last five numbers become the playback position. So you can see it here. So any questions on timecode or how we use it or why we use it or how we apply it? Anything? How do you apply timecode, Jared?
This is a trick question. I applied timecode from Ableton into a Focusrite Scarlett
Oh,
of sorts.
nice.
Set my system preferences to reference that interface, and then magic happens.
Oh, gotcha.
As long as the timecode's not warped in Ableton.
Right, which we're gonna get to. I was
Sorry,
actually looking for
jumping
more
ahead.
like Surface, or do you ingest it? However you take your time code.
1 hour at a time.
1 hour at a time. 10 minutes at a time.
True.
10 minutes of time code a day keeps your content running.
Sure does.
Any questions? No? We should.
Nope.
I wish somebody would ask a question. When you don't ask questions, things go downhill very quickly. So let's talk about troubleshooting time code then. I've got 6 things to look for when troubleshooting time code that'll be really helpful for you. Number 1, confirm Resolume audio settings. So let me jump back to Resolume and show you 3 things to look for. 3 things to look for: audio input device, SMPTE input 1 and 2, and then SMPTE frame rate. So if you go into Resolume and you go Arena Preferences, or Command Comma is the universal keyboard shortcut for preferences, and you go over on the left, you see your different tabs, and you go to the audio tab again, because timecode is just an audio signal, so it's under your audio preferences. So you've got the audio input device isn't really relevant. Audio input device is what you want to look for though. Any audio input devices that you have are going to be listed here, just like with advanced output. Any physical connections to your computer are going to be listed here. Ours, like Jared mentioned when he was applying timecode, is the Scarlett 2i2 USB. In most cases, that's what you guys are going to use. A couple people might have a different audio interface, but usually it'll be the only one plugged into your computer, other than the built-in digital input or built-in line input. You don't want to use those because that won't be very helpful unless you
No.
can generate timecode and sing it into a microphone.
Acapella.
Yeah,
Acapella timecode.
that's my impression of timecode.
Pretty good.
So Scarlett 2i2 USB is selected, so that's a good thing. If it doesn't show up in this list, sometimes Resolume doesn't like when you plug a device in after the software has been opened, so just restart the software real quick and the device should show up here.
Which is the fix for most things in Resolume. A good quit and restart.
Quit and restart. Always shut it down. Always turn it off and on again. And then the other 3 things to look for is SMPTE timecode input 1, because Resolume can take an audio interface that might have 8 or 9 or 10 or 16 channels and take 2 of those channels and use those for timecode. So we need to tell it which one. In this case, with the Scarlett 2i2, it's only got 2 inputs, 2 physical inputs on it, but input 1 and input 2. So we just kind of map it 1 to 1 or 2 to 2. So just make sure those are set. And then the third thing is SMPTE timecode frame rate. Make sure that's set to 30, not 2997, not 25, because we are not European, not 24, because we're not film guys. We're going to go right to 30 frames a second. Right, nice even number. So that's,
Remember when Andy said that the SMPTE was exported with the 30 frame rates? Everything has to talk to each other.
yep, it's all gonna match up. Gotta get some content going again. Sorry, we can edit this out of the live stream. I just kidding. I know how live streaming works.
We'll fix it in post.
So you can see my clip. And another example, just so you see, our timer, we've got 16, 10, 23, 24, 25. And if I go to won't stop now, you can see my offset is 16, 10, 0, 0, 0, 0. Jared, what do you suppose would happen if I set this offset right to 0? What would happen to my playhead? Where would it go?
I think there's a multitude of things it could do. It could just snap all the way to the front. It could just stop and freeze on a frame.
Let's try it.
Many things could happen.
Let's go back to 0. I'll just set 0. Go back. It snaps all the way to the end. Why do you think that is?
It's trying to search for something that isn't there. It still hasn't found what it's looking for.
That's right.
Thanks, Bono.
Thank you. If you do your calculation, 16 hours, your time code minus your offset, if my offset's 0 and my time code is 16 hours, 11 minutes, well, it's trying to put my playhead at 16 hours, 11 minutes, 14 seconds, 15 seconds. Well, this file is not that long. Remember how I said that we don't want to make 16-hour long video files.
Nope.
We want to just make, a 5 or 6 or 7 minute long video file. So that's where our offset comes in. So if I set this back to 16, 10, boom, now we're back on track. Or even if I set this to 16, 10, and then 30 seconds. Well, now my time code minus my offset, now I'm going to be 30 seconds behind on my content.
And that's sometimes why your lyrics are late.
Sometimes, and sometimes it might be off in Ableton. Now, a lot of times what we want to try to do is keep our offsets in even numbers based on what we have on that spreadsheet, that link that Jared posted. And if we need to do adjustments, if lyrics are late or if something is off, make the adjustment in Ableton, because I can easily just adjust the file here in Ableton. I can move it left or right, move it over this way, and now my time is shifted. So if you notice, I'm at 16, 11, 55, 56. If I just move this file over a few seconds, now I've jumped over almost a whole minute. So we try to make this adjustment in Ableton, and that's where you have your drummers do that.
And this is why it's important that if you're at a non-permanent campus and you're setting up, one of the first things you should do after your setup, before run through, is to do an Ableton check. Every Saturday at Valentine, before the band actually starts rehearsing, I set aside 10 minutes or so with our Ableton computer and sync all of these things. So it's not like we're in the middle of run through and this song is all out of sorts. We actually had time to sit down and do this. It doesn't take long.
It doesn't.
It's in a simple adjustment, literally left a few grids, right a few grids, and then typically it's right on. So it's just adding that to a part of your weekend routine will help make everybody feel more at ease during run-throughs.
Yep, absolutely. So back to troubleshooting. So number 1, confirm Resolume audio settings. I got off a little bit of a tangent there, but confirm Resolume audio settings. Step 2, verify signal to your audio interface. If you have an audio interface, it probably has some sort of indication on the front of it whether it's getting signal or not. So on a Scarlett 2i2, it's a red box and it's got 2 knobs on the front that do gain, and it's got another knob that does something we don't care about. Our gain knobs actually have a ring around them that will light up red when there's signal going to them. Some audio interfaces have meters on the front that show that they're getting signal. But verify signal to your audio interface. If there's nothing going to your audio interface, that means that either signal is not getting to your audio device. Well, that's what it means. It means signal is not getting to your audio device. So if that ring is not lit up or if one of those meters is not going, then there's something else down the line. Either there's a cable that's bad or something's not plugged in or something in Ableton is not routed or patched correctly, and that's where you want to get your drummer to troubleshoot that. But verify signal to your audio interface. Number 3, adjust signal gain. Timecode is a very strong signal, but if it's too quiet or if it's clipping and distorting, the computer can't interpret it. Remember how I said timecode is like click for computers?
Sure did.
Well, if you blast a click track in the band's ears, what are they going to do?
They're going to throw their ears out. They're going to stop playing. It's going
Yeah.
to be all jumpy.
Exactly. Or if the click is too quiet, what are they going to do?
They're not going to be able to play together.
That's exactly what timecode is too. If a computer is getting too strong of a timecode signal, it's just going to get confused. It's going to say, I don't know what to do with this. I can't play back. I might do my best, but I'm going to jump around. If it's getting too little of a signal, it's probably not going to do anything at all because it can't hear the signal. So a couple ways you can do it. You can adjust gain in Ableton, or you can adjust gain on your audio interface. Most of these gain knobs on these audio interfaces can live all the way down because the signal is so strong. But if there is a case where you aren't getting enough signal in timecode, maybe you can turn it up a little bit, or you might need to adjust it down. The problem is I never know when timecode isn't working, and I think it's a gain issue. I never know which way to go. I don't know if it's getting too much or getting too little, so I usually just need to play with it. So a little example here. I've got timecode running still. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to this song, cut over, come here. I'm going to run it, and timecode is running. And now I'm going to go to my gain over here, and I'm just going to crank it way up in Ableton because I don't have my audio interface with me. And notice it's hitting red. It's really not doing well. Now my computer is still reading it just fine, but in some cases I still might be getting too much signal to my computer where it'll just start jumping around and it'll start freaking out. I'm going to bring this all the way down. I'm going to bring it really low.
It stopped, Andy.
It stopped. Or notice how it's trying to kind of read what's happening, but it's running really slow. It's like choppy and it's locking up. I'm bring it down even more. And then it stopped. And it's not moving. So if
But
you're
I
not,
have the right timecode hour,
you did
and
have
I
the right
have the
time
right
code hour.
Ableton session.
You do have the right Ableton session, but the gain might be off. And a lot of times it's not going to be this extreme. And timecode's pretty robust, where it can usually take a lot of stuff. But even right now, you can see how it's struggling. It's hesitating to keep up. And it's playing back really choppy. It's jumping around because timecode is running, but the computer doesn't know what to do with it because it's not loud enough or it's too loud. So that's usually what I'll do is I'll just either, wherever I can, I'll adjust the gain either in Ableton or on my audio interface with Ableton. Usually when the drummer's using it, it's not accessible. So on my audio interface, I can usually adjust it there. But now I've got my gain at the right place and my timecode is happy. And one more thing with Ableton to look for is remove warping. Minimal warping is possible. So warping is what allows us to adjust the BPM of things like songs 2 or 3 BPM. So if we want to make something faster or slower, we can do that. But all the tracks will line up and still stay in time.
And the key doesn't change.
And the key doesn't change. Again, because timecode is an audio signal, sometimes that warping will actually cause it to not be readable by the computer. So I'm going to double click on this file and just turn warping on. Yeah, I'd like to warp this clip's current time. And now my BPM. So let's see what happens. Let's see if I'm still reading it correctly. So it looks like I'm still doing good, but if my song BPM gets adjusted, you'll see now my content is stopped. Now my timecode is stopped because I've got some warping on this, and even if my my timecode BPM is still pretty close, it still won't work a lot. So that's where warping is one of the first things I'll go to after looking at gain. I'll check warping and I'll just turn warping off. I go back, so I've got warping on, and now you can see it's even trying to with warping on. It's even trying to work, but I've still got a little bit of warping on, and it's not working too well. See, it's just kind of jumping around. If I adjust my BPM up a little bit, now all of a sudden it stopped. So I'll just turn warping off. Now I'll go back and we're running just like normal. And so 2 more things for troubleshooting. Replace timecode audio files in Ableton, because sometimes Ableton will bug out, and this is one of the things where it's just, I wish I knew why it happened. I don't. It's just computers do this sometimes. So we found that sometimes when timecode isn't working, the best solution is to just figure out what file I need, LTC 7 hours, just delete it and just drag it back in from your Finder. I don't have those timecode files accessible, but I'll show you that. But just have your drummer re-added into Ableton and see if that fixes it.
And what they can do is, in their Ableton session, they can go over to their tab on the left side, and they can build out libraries. So they can build an LTC or SMPTE timecode, whatever you want to call it, and have a folder of weekend timecode files. and drop them in so everything can live within inside the application instead of jumping back and forth.
Exactly.
That's just an aside, but for
So you can go
workflow,
in. Yep. And even instead of pulling it from the click session, you can just pull it right from your raw timecode files that we've made available to drummers. And then last thing, not really a troubleshooting thing, but it's more of a standard operating procedure. When in doubt, flow it out. If you cannot get timecode to work or you keep troubleshooting it and you're coming up short, that's why we put flow content at the very top. So let's say maybe you've got your timecode running, but warping was on or something, and you can't figure out what's going on, and it's not working. You see your gains going, everything's looking good, but you can't figure out what's going on, and it's just frozen. Well, just on your MIDI controller, just push up one of those flow layers and throw ProPresenter lyrics on top, and just keep moving on. It's not the end of the world if timecode runs out. Of course, we want to, and that's the reason I made this troubleshooting step 6, because we don't want to stop on 6. But at the end of the day, if you need to, that's why we have contingencies in place for you to continue to operate. Because we realize technology is technology. Sometimes things don't work out. And that's why we create flow content for you to keep moving on. Some songs we don't even use timecode for because they're not arranged out yet, and maybe we want some more flexibility with them. So there's some songs where we only use flow. But if you're using timecode and that morning you can't get it to work, use flow content. So recap, confirm Resolume audio settings, verify signal to your audio interface, adjust signal gain, remove warping in Ableton, replace timecode files in Ableton, and when in doubt, flow it out. 6 steps, 6 days, 1 step per day. Day 6, Resolume saved.
that's it.
Any questions from the web?
Cody asked, would lyrics only be off if the band creates a custom arrangement, like with a shorter intro, for example, or are there other things that would cause lyrics to get off timing? So, to answer that, if something like an intro before lyrics begin, that is where when we showed you how to actually adjust timecode, like delete time within Ableton, you could still be fine. If they are cutting a turnaround, like in between a verse or a chorus and a bridge, that's where you kind of have to decide what the win is. Is the win intricate cutting and pasting and shifting of timecode, or is the win let's just create a consistent look that we know works with flow and do ProPresenter on top of it? So when the band does make adjustments, it is possible to go intricate and make adjustments, but more often than not, it's better to just flow and keep a consistent look with ProPresenter. I don't know if you'd add anything on top of that.
Yeah, but I mean, that is one of the reasons we use timecode is it actually gives us the flexibility rather than running the content separately from Resolume. You know, we could give you, say, hey, at the beginning of the verse, listen to the click track and right on time fire the content. But what happens when the band does want to make an adjustment? Well, let's say we want to cut this second bridge, right? Well, if I run timecode and we just skip this bridge, well, I'm still going to be on the bridge here in Resolume. But what I can do is I can actually grab this whole section, this whole bridge section, and just remove it. And I'm no Ableton expert, but I can actually just slide these over. And so now when I go to my first bridge, what's going to happen is I'm going to actually skip that second bridge. We're going to jump right to, now you see a little bit of the lyrics pop up for the second bridge there, and that's where you have to decide, like Jared was saying, if you want to keep, you can definitely mess with stuff here and have time code cut a little bit earlier, and this is where drummers come into play. Maybe have it cut a little bit earlier. And that's where we just made a seamless cut of that second bridge. But that's why we use timecode, is so drummers and worship leaders can have that flexibility to be able to use this arrangement content and make little edits like that, like double a turnaround or double a chorus. But sometimes you have to be really careful about, and that's where I would want to check every one of those transitions before run through and make sure that there's no random lyrics or things that pop up beforehand. And again, if that's one of those things that you just can't quite work out, then just run the lyrics from ProPresenter, use flow content, and move on.
Great question, though.
Yeah, great question. Any more questions?
I don't have any questions.
Oh, do you not? I have a question, Jared.
Ask me.
Um, what did we used to do for worship visuals?
How far back would you like me to go? Because when I first got here, we were using motion backs in ProPresenter.
Then what did we start doing after that?
We
What was
used
our progression?
we used the green hippo,
Yep,
and then it failed more than it worked. So we
true.
used something called Malumen. Fun fact, my first Sunday at Uptown, Andy was beta testing Malumen at Uptown, and I'm pretty sure that's what got me the job.
True.
And we used Malumen for probably 4 years,
Yep,
and that was based off of a click intro cue and then rest of the song cue.
yep. But then that locked us in because we didn't have any flexibility with our visuals at
Zero
that point.
flexibility.
So we could have moved back to ProPresenter or motion backs and done that, but we decided to find somewhere in the middle.
And it was actually an Elevation Worship tour that they first took Resolume on, and then
Yep.
it kind of started to trickle into the campuses.
Yeah.
It was here for like 5 months, and then you started beta testing it out at other campuses, and now everyone does it.
Nice. All right, we got some questions. What do we got?
Will this video be available after the live stream?
Yes, it will be. We'll be chopping it up and editing it into different segments, and then we'll post it after the fact.
Great, thanks Dan. Kayla asks, can Roanoke run lyrics from ProPresenter over our visuals?
Yes, that's a great question. That's why we have lyrics on their own layer, because you can do a couple things. You can either bring the lyrics layer down, and that's actually mapped to your MIDI controller. If you bring, it'll bring both of these layers down. Or what I would do, because we use the lyrics layer for the clock with the 2-minute countdown, what I would do is just go through these individual clips, and this is why we have them labeled like Won't Stop Now, 1C lyrics, Overcome 2A lyrics. You can just select all these, and I'm holding down Command to select multiples. I'll just right click and then clear those out. And we don't have any lyrics for King My Heart. Those run from ProPresenter, but now those will just be standard ProPresenter lyrics. The animated lyrics and fancy stuff have to run from Resolume, but we can do standard lyrics from ProPresenter if you need to just run visuals and flow content. Of course, if you push flow content up, it'll override the lyrics anyway, so you don't have to worry about that. And then you can run lyrics from ProPresenter.
Something that is almost just as important from understanding the user interface of Resolume is understanding the MIDI controller. You can understand this all day, but if you have someone that doesn't know what Fader 7 does before they sit down, and they think, oh yeah, I don't need this, it's down, then you're going to lose clock, you're going to lose lyrics, things like that. So it's totally a own your role scenario of just understanding what everything actually does. And Andy has made a PDF of the MIDI controller layout, so each button, each fader, each encoder knob, like this right
There we
here.
go. And I can repost this on Slack if you ever need it. You can reach out, but most production directors should have it and have it posted. But this whole thing is mapped out. So like I said, your 4 faders, faders 1 through 4, are flow content 1 through 4. Fader 5 is your pixel bars, that whole layer group. Fader 6 is your visuals layers. Fader 7 are your lyrics layers, and Fader 8 is your master. That's everything. You can bail out and fade down everything. So those are really important to know. Usually what's going to happen is faders 1 through 4 are going to live and be down the whole time unless you're using them for flow. But in between songs, during the sermon, whatever, bring them down. Faders 5 through 8 are going to be up unless you're doing a video and you need to bring fader 8 down or something like that. But faders 1 through 4 down, faders 5 through 8 up, kind of a default. Cool. Any other questions? Well, we went a little bit over our time. Hope you guys are
Follow-up question, how do we get lyrics on all 3 of our screens? Do we change and key on different auxes? Yes.
Gotcha.
This is all through your switcher, through keys and aux assignments. You might need to use a mini ME for the center screen, but that can be a macro that you build, so it doesn't have to be manual every time.
But I think, Kayla, you guys are doing iMag on side screen still, right? I think that's what she's talking about, is using the lower third lyrics.
I see.
And unfortunately, no, because you don't have enough video outputs on your computer to be able to do that. That would be where you would have to use more than one video output, like I was saying, with under your advanced output. But if you only have display 2 to work with, you don't have enough outputs to be able to output lyrics separately without visuals on your switcher. Also, there's a function or a concept called alpha keying, where it actually allows us to generate 2 different outputs from Resolume, one that's essentially an alpha channel, and then one that's the actual content that allows us to pull some content up, that allow us to actually um, key lyrics on separately using alpha data. So these look the same, but one of these is going to the switcher as a key layer, and it's using the black and white data to tell this fill layer what to actually let through. Anything that's black is going to be transparent, anything that's white is going to be opaque. So it's going to overlay on top. Unfortunately, we don't have enough. That would require 2 different video outputs in addition to your normal video output to do. So that's why we really only have the capability at Ballantine to do that. Some people have gotten creative and just found a way to get one extra video output out of the computer and done a little, I guess a self key or a Luma key and just key out black. But sometimes when there's lyrics content that uses a black bar, Won't Stop Now is a good example. It'll actually key out that black bar. Let me pull that up. I want to make sure that's clear. I want to pull this back up and show you what I mean. So the lyrics for this song are a black bar with yellow text. Well, at Ballantine, what we're doing is we're taking that black bar. Let me get this set up. There we go. So we've got this lower third look set up here. And see, it looks like I'm just getting black with yellow text, but there's actually a black bar there, and that's where my key layer is coming in and helping me, because it's actually telling the switcher, hey, anything in this area, make that white, or make that opaque, and let that show through. So I think, Jared, are you trying to pull it up on here?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
this
it's
is
not working.
it's ME1 hard routed, and
Oh,
I was
yeah.
going through ME2 nerd talk.
Nerd talk. But anyway, what you're seeing is you're actually going to see at the end of the day, you're going to see this whole black bar shine through, while everything in this area is going to be transparent. But if you were just trying to send this straight to your switcher, all your switcher would see is a bunch of black, and if you did a key out, it would just show the the yellow lyrics, and that would be kind of hard to read, and that wouldn't look exactly how we intend. So, so that's why we haven't rolled that out, and that's why most campuses that only have one screen don't have to worry about this, because they just show up with the visuals, and it's all one output. But good question, good opportunity for us to go on a tangent there and talk about key fill and more advanced output stuff. That's where you can see advanced output is super powerful, because it allows us to do stuff like that.
Cody asked if there was any chance we could send out timecode values for verses, chorus, and bridges to the spreadsheet to make custom arrangements easier to use the animated lyrics. And to what I would say to that is, if you want to explore timecode values and all that kind of stuff and connect with your drummer and your worship team, that is totally up to you to do that. What we've done is equipped the the basic must-haves for each song and different arrangements that are listed. Also, if your worship leader is consistently doing different types of arrangements, first ask the question of which arrangement is best, and two, does everything actually need visual support? Some of the most
Yeah,
powerful worship times that we've had at Ballantine are when there is purpose in the lyrics over a black background, and those have been some of my favorite worship moments. So don't box yourself into we have to have visuals for everything, because
right.
sometimes things just look better simple, and people are able to focus on what God has for them in that worship moment instead of looking at the visuals on screen. So that's probably not the answer that you wanted me to give you, but it's a lot to think about.
True. And we wouldn't really, it's not a great way to get time code values for specific verses, choruses, etc., because as you can see here, there's not really a great way to read those in Ableton. They wouldn't be super helpful. What my method is, and that's why we actually have these in Ableton. They build out these little kind of markers or labels, or locators as they call them, to where you can just go in here if you know you want to just like try out the timing of the verse. You can just go right here and jump to the verse and see if it's actually running. At the verse, I think I'm on the wrong song. There we go. That's where you can just jump right to a certain section. So I kind of use Ableton as my navigator in that, and just make sure my start point is ready to go, and make sure all my content moves together with my locators. So like I said, if we need to move an entire verse together, use my locator as kind of that. Same way we'd handle loops and things, use my locator as sort of the way to identify where that is, and then work around that. So don't know if that answers your question. Hope it helps. All right, well, 120. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for taking probably some of your lunch break, or some of you probably aren't working today and just want a little bit of midday, uh, you know, a midday fun from me and Jared.
Sorry the banter was lacking more than usual.
Yeah, we could have
We were
done
down to the
we could have
wire
done
on
better.
setup. We were down to the wire on
Yeah,
setup and wanted to make sure that things worked.
yeah,
But they
but
worked.
they did work, and I hope that helps. I'm sure this won't be the last time we'll do one of these training sessions, and like I said, we will post these after the fact, and get this resource out to you guys, or whoever wasn't ever able to tune in. We'll cut this out. We'll cut out a good amount of the banter.
Maybe. We'll see.
Maybe, I don't know. We'll probably leave it in.
Bob Ross has to stay.
Bob Ross will stay, um, and that's it. Greg, you're welcome. We appreciate y'all tuning in.
Yeah.
I hope it helped. If there are more things that would be helpful for you guys to learn, let us know on Slack. Or if there's anything else you want us to do a deep dive on, let us know. This one I wanted to kind of address a couple things that have been consistent issues over the weekends, but in the future, if there's something where you're like, hey, I want to just learn more about this, let me know. We can set up either another live stream or even a training session to show you more. But that's it. I hope it helps, and we'll see you guys next time.